The night everything changed. Chapter 1. A Night of Innocence. Lisa had always been a devoted mother and a loving wife. Her life revolved around her family, and she prided herself on the strong bond she shared with her husband Mark and their two children, Emily and Jake. They were a close-knit family, always spending time together, whether it was during weekend getaways or simple movie nights at home. But one fateful night, everything would change. Lisa hadn't had a night out with her friends in years. Between managing the household, helping the kids with their schoolwork, and maintaining a full-time job, she rarely found time for herself. So, when her old college friends invited her to a girls' night out, she hesitated at first. Mark encouraged her, saying she deserved some time to unwind. That night, Lisa dressed up, feeling a bit like her younger self again. She joined her friends at a lively bar downtown, where the music was loud and the drinks were flowing freely. The laughter and the camaraderie took her back to a time before responsibilities weighed so heavily on her shoulders. As the night wore on, the drinks kept coming. Lisa, who wasn't much of a drinker, found herself loosening up more than she had in years. She danced with her friends, lost in the moment, oblivious to the time slipping away. But what started as innocent fun soon spiraled into something much darker. Chapter 2. The Mistake. The details of that night were a blur. Lisa remembered the laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the friendly faces around her. She remembered dancing, feeling free, and not having a care in the world. But somewhere along the way, things took a turn. She vaguely remembered a handsome stranger who had been buying her drinks. They had talked, laughed, and maybe even flirted a little. She thought it was harmless. But as the night went on, her memory became hazy. She couldn't recall how they ended up outside, or how they had gotten so close. The next morning, Lisa woke up with a pounding headache and a sinking feeling in her stomach. She was back in her bed, but the events of the previous night were a fragmented mess in her mind. Mark was already up, getting the kids ready for school. When he saw her, he smiled, but she could see the concern in his eyes. "Rough night?" he asked gently. Lisa nodded, forcing a smile. She wanted to brush it off, to pretend that everything was fine, but a gnawing feeling inside her told her something was very wrong. Later that day, as she was tidying up the house, her phone buzzed. It was a message from one of her friends. Lisa's heart stopped as she read the text. "Hey, are you okay? I saw you leave with that guy last night. I hope everything's all right." Panic surged through her. What had she done? She frantically searched her memory, trying to piece together the night, but it was all a blur. Chapter 3. The Consequences. Over the next few days, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had happened. She tried to focus on her family, but the guilt was eating her alive. She didn't dare tell Mark or her children. How could she, when she didn't even know the full extent of her mistake? But secrets have a way of coming out. A week later, Lisa received another message. This time, it was from an unknown number. It was a photo, a blurry image of her and the stranger, too close for comfort, outside the bar that night. The message that followed was simple and chilling. "I know what you did." Lisa's world came crashing down. She felt sick, trapped in a nightmare of her own making. She couldn't keep this from Mark any longer. That evening, she sat him down and confessed everything. The night out, the stranger, the messages, it all came pouring out in a torrent of tears and apologies. Mark was devastated. The pain in his eyes was unbearable. He didn't yell, didn't accuse. He simply withdrew into himself, a wall of silence between them. He moved to the guest room that night, and Lisa knew she had shattered something in him that might never be repaired. The next day, Emily and Jake noticed the tension. They asked what was wrong, but Lisa couldn't bring herself to tell them the truth. But children are perceptive, and they soon realized that something had broken in their family. They became distant, confused, and hurt by the sudden coldness between their parents. Chapter 4. The Fallout. The weeks that followed were a nightmare. Mark refused to talk to Lisa, his silence more painful than any words could have been. He spent more time at work, leaving Lisa alone to face the guilt and shame that consumed her. Emily and Jake, once so close to their mother, began to pull away as well. They sensed the rift in the family, but didn't understand it. Lisa tried to be there for them, to show them she still loved them, but they were angry and confused. They wanted answers that Lisa couldn't give. One day, Emily confronted her. "Why is Dad so upset? Why aren't you talking to each other?" she demanded, tears in her eyes. Lisa wanted to tell her the truth, but how could she? How could she admit to her daughter that she had made a mistake that could destroy their family? Instead, she simply said, "Sometimes adults make mistakes and it takes time to fix them." But Emily wasn't satisfied with that. She was growing up and she deserved to know the truth. Eventually, Mark told the kids what had happened, his voice strained and full of sorrow. He didn't go into details, but the damage was done. Emily and Jake were crushed, their trust in their mother shattered. They couldn't understand how the woman they had looked up to could have made such a terrible mistake. The relationship between Lisa and her children deteriorated rapidly. They stopped confiding in her, stopped seeking her comfort. They turned to their father instead, leaving Lisa isolated in her own home. Every time she looked at them, she saw the disappointment in their eyes, the pain she had caused them. Chapter 5. The final goodbye months passed, and the distance between Lisa and her family only grew. She tried everything to make amends: counselling, heartfelt apologies, promises to change. But nothing seemed to bridge the gap. Mark remained distant, his love for her buried under layers of hurt and betrayal. One evening, after yet another failed attempt to reach out to her children, Lisa found Mark in the living room, his bags packed. "I think it's best if I move out for a while," he said quietly, not meeting her eyes. Lisa's heart broke all over again. She knew this was coming, but it didn't make it any easier to bear. "Please, Mark, we can work through this," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. But Mark shook his head. "I need time, Lisa, we all do. Maybe it's best if we have some space." And with that, he left, taking the kids with him. Lisa was left alone in the empty house, the silence echoing the void in her heart. Chapter 6. The Road to Redemption. Lisa's life became a series of lonely days and sleepless nights. She missed her family terribly, but she knew she had to give them space. She threw herself into her work, into volunteering, into anything that could distract her from the pain. Slowly, she began to rebuild her life, finding solace in helping others. She attended support groups, where she met people who had made similar mistakes and were trying to make amends. It wasn't easy, but it was a start. Months turned into years, and though the wound never fully healed, Lisa learned to live with it. She accepted that her actions had consequences, and that she couldn't undo the past. But she could learn from it, and she could become a better person. One day, out of the blue, Emily called. Her voice was tentative, but there was a softness to it that Lisa hadn't heard in years. "Mum, can we talk?" she asked. And in that moment, Lisa knew that while she might never fully regain what she had lost, there was still hope. Hope for healing, hope for forgiveness, and hope for a future where they could all find peace.